Welcome back. We're happy to have you with us, or join us, or have you watching this as we continue our reflections. We're up to the 5th Sunday of Lent. We're in year A here in our parish. Winter has returned for now in Western New York. It's not unusual, but it's certainly still annoying to everybody. So, but we're very happy to have you with us. Teresa will read the raising of Lazarus.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Now a man was ill, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who had anointed the Lord with perfumed oil and dried his feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was ill. So the sisters of Lazarus sent word to Jesus, saying, "Master, the one you love is ill." When Jesus heard this, he said, "This illness is not to end in death, but is for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just trying to stone you, and you want to go back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If one walks during the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks at night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him." He said this and then told them, "Our friend Lazarus is asleep, but I am going to awaken him." So the disciples said to him, "Master, if he is asleep, he will be saved." But Jesus was talking about his death, while they thought that he meant ordinary sleep. So then Jesus said to them clearly, "Lazarus has died, and I am glad for you that I was not there, that you may believe. Let us go to him." So Thomas, called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go to die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, only about 2 miles away. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary sat at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise." Martha said to him, "I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world." When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary secretly, saying, "The teacher is here and is asking for you." As soon as she heard this, she rose quickly and went to him. For Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still where Martha had met him. So when the Jews who were with her in the house comforting her saw Mary get up quickly and go out, they followed her, presuming that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, She fell at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her weeping, he became perturbed and deeply troubled, and said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Sir, come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have done something so that this man would not have died?" So Jesus, perturbed again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay across it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the dead man's sister, said to him, "Lord, by now there will be a stench. He has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd here, I have said this, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. So Jesus said to them, "Untie him and let him go." Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what he had done began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. So there's a couple of things in here that are maybe a little bit unusual. The thing about Jesus being perturbed. I have to look at the Greek and see what word that is. It's a strange word. We don't use it very much in English, perturbed. And what does it mean? Why? Why did he get upset? That's an interesting question that I think I'll move on past for now. But the one thing that I really like to draw out in this reading is the very end. So after you read that whole thing, Teresa, I'm going to talk about the very end, and then the one thing in the middle. But is when they see the burial bands and they say, "Untie him and let him go." Untie him and let him go. And I always ask anybody whenever we're talking about this reading, that what does that sound like? And what it sounds like is that he's being released from prison. So untie him, or some captivity, or some form of slavery or whatever. That Lazarus comes back from the dead, comes out, and is wrapped in these bands, and they're like shackles. And then they untie him, let him go, take the chains off. And it's not an accident. It's saying something about death. That death is a punishment. It's a prison. It's something that you are now in Jesus Christ liberated from, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I may have mentioned this before in some of the videos that I've done here, but we can imagine even the woman at the well. It's a little bit more of a stretch, but definitely the healing of the man born blind, and this one. That you have this connection of death with sin. Who sinned, Lord, that this man was born blind? Is asked of Jesus in the man born blind reading. And he says, neither. And by saying that, he's saying that this idea that sin caused this man's blindness, which always had gone together, always had gone to time, from time immemorial. Sin had gone along with some weakening of the physical body. Not always death, but a lessening of life. So blindness was caused by sin. And he makes the correlation with the Pharisees that if they were blind, they would not have sinned. And it's a very strange thing in that sense to say. But from time immemorial, sin and death are intermingled. The pain of sin, the burden of sin is death. And that has come, I think it's very practical. Many people culturally would blame religions for associating these things, and it's much older than that. It's much older than religion. It's a very practical reason. If early peoples had discovered that some thing became dangerous for them, hunting at night, hunting by the cliff, doing something. Like if someone had gone and done, hunted over in a particular place where there was some danger, and they never came back, then you can imagine that a rule might develop. If you do that, you die. You associate sin and the rule which protects life, and the breaking of it means you'll die. It's very practical, very practical. But over time, it becomes associated then with a lessening of life, and it becomes punishment. So we end up with a punitive system. If you steal, you have this punishment, and it has to do with you've broken a rule, and when you break a rule, the punishment that naturally follows is a lessening of life, is some lessening. So pain was inflicted, and also an imprisonment, which is a lessening of life. You weren't free. So I hope I'm not going on and on, but that's a very practical way in which the law protects our life. And when we break the law, we lose some part of it, whether it's by becoming blind, whether it's by being punished, or whether it's by falling off the cliff that we're forbidden to go walk near, at night especially. Anyway, all right, so that's a long little anthropological, philosophical thing. That it's actually a rather short version of a longer, could be a much longer video. But we can see that as time progressed and as we came up with more laws, we came up with this idea that the reason people suffer is because of some sin that they committed. Now, certainly this is true. People who have done things that they regret are often suffering, trying to figure out ways to atone that, trying to figure out ways to make it right. When you do something that, there's a philosopher who says sin makes a person incomprehensible to his or herself. And I think that's very much true. Is that I don't know why I did that. I'm broken on the inside. I need to be restored. And the restoration we seek is in Jesus Christ. He heals the man born blind. We associate that he's born blind with sin, and Jesus heals it. Death is the natural consequence of sin. And therefore, when he raises Lazarus, he's saying something also about him, his authority to forgive and to let you go from the punishment of sin, which is death. So, untie him and let him go in that sense makes perfect sense. That we have all become alive again in Lazarus. And Lazarus, again, like the woman at the well, like the man born blind himself, it stands for all of us in some sense. He stands for all of us. That all of us have been liberated from death. All of us have been given true life. And it also puts this idea of life and death and sin into one idea. There's a long, there's a conflict in theological thinking sometimes, which is, did Jesus come to forgive sins, or did he come to give us life? And I have always gone down initially on Jesus came to give us life. And you have this idea that, no, he came to forgive sins, and people are fighting with it. They're missing the whole point that they're the same thing. That in order for us to have a share in the divine life, we must become a new creation. We must become renewed. We must become members of the body of Christ. We must become and put on Christ, as the baptism rite says. We're getting ahead of ourselves. We're going to do a baptism video this week too. But that's really, really at the core of this, is that he comes to give life, and in order to do so, the debt has to be paid. The difference is that if you only think about the forgiveness of sins and that God is here to forgive sins, if you're only thinking that, then are you opening yourself up to the gifts that God wants to give you? And that's the problem if you only talk about sin. So sometimes when people get going, no, he came to forgive sins, and they start to look at their life, maybe, potentially, as a breaking even. And that's not what we're given. We're given what Lazarus got. He got his life back. We're given true life. So this is a wonderful reading to kind of put those very heady ideas together. And that in our life together, it is not only the forgiveness of sins, but it is that we gain true life. It's one of those things that's very curious about human beings, and I notice it from my conversations, is if it's much more accepted. Harshness is easier to accept than kindness. I don't know that anybody's surprised by that here, but when people are kind to you, it's often very challenging. Or people are saying, "Look how wonderful you are! What a gift you are!" When you tell somebody who's really hurting how heroic their actions are, they often don't want to hear it. They resist it with everything. But if you come down and say, "I told you so," they'll often agree with you. And it's a funny thing. I have alienated more people in my life by being kind to them by being mean. And probably on one list, they're both longer lists than I'd like them to be. But that is part of it, is we have a real hard time accepting good things, or when people give us compliments, or when we have a really hard time. But if someone comes up and says, "You did this, then the best people in the world will go, "Yeah, I know, and they'll hang their head." But when you're trying to build people up, it's often very challenging. So I would invite you to, if that fits your way of looking at the world, I would invite you to embrace what God has given you. In Lent, and I say it here very often, remember that when you're getting on your case about your faults and failings during Lent, any time of the year if you're doing this, but especially during Lent, because we're good at beating ourselves up, building ourselves up. We're not very good at. And some of the people who are, are building themselves up, maybe are doing so too much. But it's really, really wonderful people who are really excellent at giving themselves a hard time, and forget, and we miss that at the end of this Lent, at the end of this journey, at the end of this heartache that we experience with when Jesus Christ is taken from us on Palm Sunday, Good Friday is what I meant to say. When Jesus is taken from us on Good Friday, we forget in those moments that Easter follows. So remember that. If you tear yourself down, make sure you pray to Him who is going to build you back up with the power of His Spirit and with the gift of His grace. Because as I continue on, recognize the absolute stunning wonder and greatness of the people of God who are empowered by Jesus Christ when they gather and when they participate in the sacraments. It's a wonderful, wonderful honor to see those kinds of things. And then when you remind people, "Look how beautiful you've become," they go, "Oh, stop," and they walk away from you and they don't believe it. Okay, so let people say nice things about you, especially if they're true. But let them say them even when sometimes you might argue with them. Okay, have a good week. It's supposed to get really warm this week and thunderstorm, and it'll wash the snow away that we have out here, and we'll have a nice week. But spring is coming for sure. And keep your prayer up for the people of Ukraine and for the people of Russia and for some end to this horrific conflict. Your prayers have done a lot of good already, but I would love to see a quicker resolution than what we're getting right now to all of this. Take good care, and thank you very much.